I've said it before and I'll say it again, Chanel is the toxic ex that we all keep going back to. Today, I thought I would spend some time looking at old Chanel under Karl versus new Chanel under Virginie, and why, even with price increases and quality issues and X, Y and Z, do we keep crawling back? This is a generalisation, because I know that some people have been really off-put by Chanel, and that's something that we're going to be covering as well today. And I will share my personal thoughts at the end and sort of how I feel about it. And just speaking from a personal standpoint, even when I've been like, oh, I'm not interested, I keep doing that thing like you do to an ex, where you stalk their Instagram and you see where they're at and you just want to check what, you know, just check in how your life's going without me. And then, you know, exactly, I cast my minds back to the collection and I'm like, oh, actually, that's really nice. Damn it! Bit of a deep dive about the world of Chanel in recent years. In 2019, Virginie Viard, I'm sure there is a correct French pronunciation of her last name, and my brain cells couldn't produce what that was meant to be. Following the death of Karl Lagerfeld, who really was Chanel, and we associated him with Chanel, Chanel with him, they were one and the same, really. Clearly in all my excitement, I forgot to make the very important point in all of this, that Virginie took over from Karl. Now, Virginie has pretty much exclusively worked for Chanel, except for a short stint at Chloe, since 1987 when she was an intern. So she really is somebody that knows the Chanel brand through and through, was Karl Lagerfeld's right hand arm, his fluffy little rabbit, insert meme here in case nobody understands that.
I'm Mr. Sterling's right-hand arm man. His silly rabbit.
His what?
His silly rabbit.
His silly rabbit?
Yes.
Is that what he calls you?
No.
So it made sense that after Karl's passing, the torch be given to her. But there have been a lot of changes to the Chanel brand. I'm going to start off with it sort of aesthetically and within collections before we break down into other aspects. So I want to do a tiny little bit of a comparison between the shows. The shows when it came to Chanel, you know, pretty much exclusively at the Grand Palais in Paris. It was always a spectacular, a show, memorable, you know? And I wanted to compare the 3 years before Karl's death to the years that we have had Virginie for. And I'm just going to be covering the main collections, so spring, summer and autumn, winter. Let's start from spring, summer 2017. The whole set design was a mainframe. I don't know if you guys remember this one, but this is one that sticks in my mind. There were robot aspects. We were in the motherboard and the whole collection was tied to it. And I think that that's what Chanel used to do really well, was from the set you could be like, oh my gosh, this is the collection. I know exactly what it's going to be like. Fall winter 2017, again, sticking with technology, we had a massive Chanel rocket. 2018, the whole concept was rain, a lot of PVC, and for this it was all sort of a nature scene with a massive waterfall in the background. Fall winter 2018, carrying on with nature, the forest floor. Spring summer 2019, we had a tropical beach with waves that were coming in and everything. The models were holding their little sandals in their hand, traipsing up and down the front of the beach for the show. And then for his final show, fall winter 19, we were on the top of a mountain, there was snow, it was very sort of alpine winter village chic. Then we've got Virginie onwards. So we started off with her first show for the brand being on the Paris rooftops. We remember there was a protester. Gigi Hadid stepped in. Fall winter 20, just sort of these swirls, as it were. I don't know how else to describe that. Glacier vibes is, I think, the point. Spring summer 2021, we had the Chanel Hollywood sign with the sort of old Hollywood theme. Fall winter 21, the Grand Palais was under reconstruction and they moved it into a nightclub. Sort of very dark, a little bit dingy in a chic way. Spring summer 2022, they sort of leaned on their 90s runways. It was very sort of stereotypically a runway coming down. Everybody was sort of sunken, looking up at the models. And then fall 2022 was all sort of tweed vibes. But again, the set design wasn't really a huge part of it. And I think that that has been the biggest change in the shows. Now, what's a bit of a struggle to get to the bottom of is we don't know if this is a decision from the higher-ups and the marketing team and the CEO and blah, 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 saying we've got to cut back on the shows, do what you can with what you've got. Or this is Virginie's creative direction, and as a whole she's like, I want to really step things back a bit on the shows. Personally, I used to really love the sets for the Chanel shows. There was the library, there was the casino. My personal favourite is the supermarket. Don't even. That whole collection, all of the camp around it, it was just 10 out of 10. So yes, I think there's definitely been a change in the shows. By the way, if you are new here, my name is Cassie and I'm a self-diagnosed luxury addict. I put out videos on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, so if you like luxury fashion, then you're going to love it here. So head down there, subscribe, turn on the bell, become a member of our luxury addicted family. When are we going to rehab? Never. Now I want to talk a bit more about the collections themselves. And I almost think that it's followed the set design in that the collections seem to be a bit more simple, a bit more leaning on basics, a bit less showmanship and more wearable. Okay, we're going to get back to this word. If you look at a lot of Virginie's ready-to-wear, they are easily integrated into a lot of people's wardrobes. They tend to be simple with the logo. And I think the logo part is important because people are really loving that lovely little CC. It doesn't have to be a big logo, it doesn't have to be showy. But the fact that they are making little Chanel crop tops with a tiny little CC and people are going mad for it because it's easily integrated into people's collections already, I think we've got to remember that. They tend to have this sort of formula. If you look at the pieces that like personal shoppers are posting, the ones that they're getting the most requests for, well, but it tends to be these ones. For the research for this video, I basically looked through all of the bag collections specifically, because I know that that's the part of Chanel that a lot of people are interested in, from spring-summer 2017 all the way through to now. And I don't know it, like, I didn't go there with a little sort of, you know, tally chart going at it, but one thing that I think I've noticed in general is that there used to be a wider range of bag styles for each collection. So you would obviously have the classics or the styles that Chanel does regularly, and then you would have a lot of these seasonal styles. And I think while we do still have a good range and, you know, a lot of seasonal styles in more recent Chanel collections, I don't think it's to the same extent as it was. The other thing is that I think Chanel did a lot more gimmicks than they do now. And they definitely do still do them. If we think of things like they've got their mini bags on necklaces and AirPod cases, and their cruise collection has like tiny little tennis rackets that are also mirrors. The gimmicks are still there. They love a little bit of novelty sprinkled in, but nowhere near the same extent as it used to be. I always remember that I used to get excited for what was the like novelty bag of the show. They always used to have a minot d'hier that was ridiculous and over the top and very much into the theme of the show. There was a robot. There was the little milk carton, I love that bag, the little oil can. And then sort of outside of those minot d'hiers, there was the hoop bag, there was the boy bag with the LED lettering in it that like came out and said Chanel as it was swinging on your arm. Is it the most wearable thing that you can, you know, have it swinging on your arm to go and, you know, get some chicken breasts from the corner shop? No, but it's fun. It's so hard to judge apples to apples on these collections because you don't know if it's just the tides are changing in fashion generally and the sort of current trends of what people want, or is it something that's like, no, this is very Virginie style and this is very Karl style. You know, it's hard to judge. Now, I wanted to take a moment to go through Chanel's finances. Oh, her economics degree has finally come in handy. I went through the financial statements and to have a look at like how sales have been doing. So since 2017, sales of 9.6 billion, 2018, 11.1 billion, 2019, 12.3 billion. And it said here, ready-to-wear in particular performed well. Is this again because it's a little bit more wearable under Virginie? 2020, 10.1 billion in sales. And that was because of COVID was a big part of that. But apparently before sort of that March lockdown, they saw double-digit growth in the fashion sector. And then in 2021, this is the most recent one, they haven't released their 2022 one yet, 15.6 billion. And then there was a note that says double-digit growth in fashion in particular, leather goods and ready-to-wear. So, I think apart from COVID, which is definitely an outlier, Chanel's sales growth has gone up and up and up. But one thing that we have to consider with this is their price increases, because they can sell less for more. Is that the biggest contributor? We'll never know. We'll never know the breakdown and all of that. But I think those little sort of add-on and notes that they added, it is proved that Virginie Chanel sells well. I know a lot of people really don't like Chanel under her. You're always going to have this when there's a change of creative director, because we get oddly, what's the word, attached to some of them. But I'm sad that Alessandro Michele is no longer with Gucci. But times change, and we've either got to be like, okay, fine, let me see what there is from this, or you move into another brand sort of thing. Now, when we talk about Chanel online, there really are sort of three issues that people bring up. One, not so much as the others, but number one, price increases. And while price increases is something that we see across these sort of high-end brands, the quantity of price increases around COVID, following COVID with Chanel, is the thing that's really rubbed people the wrong way. And also the amount of those percentages. We're not talking about a 50, £100 increase here, we're talking about 20% on some of the items. It's not across all of the bags. Some bags get a higher price increase than others and things like that, right? Issue number two that comes up is the quality. One of you guys, seasoned subscriber, contacted me on Instagram and showed that, you know, she was wanting to buy a classic flap. It had a fault in it. Luckily, she was able to return it or exchange it. But it's become such a thing, and I've walked into Chanel's and seen business affinity bags on the shelves with a wonky flap. How are you happy having this like on display? So it's something that those of us that are still buying are keeping another eye out for, and is another reason why people have really been turned off for the brand. It's like, I'm giving you £5,000, £6,000, £7,000, dollars, whatever, and you can't even make sure that the turn lock is flush to the rest of the bag, which is 100% understandable. Chanel also hasn't done gold plating for a long time, and a lot of the aspects of the bag aren't, you know, man-made from start to finish, as it is with Hermes and brands like that. Now, the third complaint is, to be honest with you, this might just be a personal one, but if you don't have a Chanel SA, luckily I've got one in London who's great and lovely. I honestly think it is one of the most intimidating designer stores to enter. And this is going to depend on where you are in the store and all of that. But I would just say, in general, from the stores I've been into, Chanel is the one that's like, I don't know who I'm going to get today. There are certain stores who, generally, the customer service and the SAs are so friendly, Dior and Fendi. So that's just my little concern that while we were here I thought I would raise. But why do we keep going back? I have reduced this down to two reasons. The two R's, reputation and range. Starting off with number one. Reputation, I mean within luxury fashion as a whole. When we talk of luxury, you could stop a random person on the street that isn't interested in luxury fashion and say, name me 3 luxury fashion brands, one of them will undoubtedly be Chanel, if not the first one out of their mouth. It is so ingrained in luxury fashion, and because of that it's seen to be sort of one of the pinnacles of luxury. You can't talk about Chanel and not talk about the classic flap. This bag is a bag that is a dream bag for so many. It's like, oh my gosh, if I only have one designer bag, it's a classic flap. Chanel is such a constant in luxury fashion that it's almost almost like it's on everybody's bingo card. Like, if you play the game of luxury fashion, Chanel is on there, you know? But I also think that Chanel sells its aesthetic very well, and you almost buy into being a Chanel girly, whether or not that aesthetic has changed in recent years. I think also we have to talk about the status of the name. And I think that we would be lying if we're going to talk about luxury fashion and go, oh, the name doesn't matter sort of thing. Because of course it sort of influences some decisions and how much you decide to pay on something compared to something else. And the name carries a lot of weight with some of us. The weight behind Chanel is pretty hefty. Also, because of that Chanel aesthetic and this sort of world of Chanel that they've created, with it comes a lot of brand loyalty. So my mum is a Chanel girly through and through. So I got her on the phone and I wanted to ask her a little bit like, why? Obviously Chanel prices go up, quality's a bit shoddy here and there, you've got to double check if you get a bag, if this thing is right and it's 90 degrees to all that business, right? You still love Chanel, you still buy. What is it about Chanel that makes you go back?
It's because of the way I look at my wardrobe.
Okay.
I generally follow fashion trends.
Mm-hmm.
I look at pieces that will last me.
Mm-hmm.
That will be there for years to come, that you will wear, and my granddaughter, if I'm ever blessed to have one, will wear.
It's the fact that Chanel is Chanel in 10, 20, 50 years' time.
It's the whole prestige. My Chanel jacket, come on, all those jackets, today I can wear any.
If you compare the amount of bags they drop with each collection, this isn't just spring, summer, fall, winter, this is spring, summer, pre-collection, spring, summer, part 1, part 2, cruise, pre-fall, their métier d'art. There is so much. No other brand drops that amount of product for each collection. The only one that I thought was like a similar sort of amount is Louis Vuitton, and even then I really don't think it's comparable. If you just look at the number of bags alone, let alone accessories, ready to wear, shoes, I think there is a lot for people to potentially love. And so the Chanel person has quite a range to choose from. You've got the classic Chanel, you've got the very trendy stuff as well. There's a lot of options there for somebody to be interested in. Also, I would be remiss if I did not talk about the SLG collection, which they've really expanded in the past few years to house a lot of mini bags. Again, if you want a Chanel bag at a lower price point than, you know, some of the seasonal pieces or classic flaps, then the SLGs is a good way to go. So now it comes to why am I? Why do I cast a little eye over there? Why am I a bit like, oh, so what's that you're doing? And a lot of the times there'll be a collection and I'm like, there's nothing for me, thank you very much. But every so often there is something, and I don't know what it is. I don't think there is a comparable brand in terms of aesthetic. You know, where else am I going to get something like this? So that also limits the options. So you're like, well, I'm back here. Also, I don't even know if I should confess to this, truly. I said I wouldn't buy a classic flap. And I think we all know I'm not a medium, a large, a jumbo, a maxi classic flap girl. That one we know. I've seen a mini classic flap in probably the most me variation that exists. And if I can get my hands on it, I think I've got to. Like, it's very me. Trust me, it's so me. So me to the point that my mum was like, I was like, is it a 10 out of 10? She said, that's an 11. So yes, I go back with my tail between my legs. And yes, of course, I'll be a lot more scrutiny with, you know, with quality and all of that, which is sad. It's sad that we have to be like, is it a good one? You know, is everything where it's supposed to be? But really, there is no alternative to that aesthetic. And I think that that's the bit that has me. What are you up to? With prices, there are some things that I would simply never buy from Chanel. But there are so many other things that tend to reel me in. What are your Chanel thoughts? I'm going to link to another video over here in case you haven't already seen it. Have an amazing morning, afternoon or evening wherever you are. And in the words of my father,
if you've enjoyed it, tell your friends. If you haven't, keep your mouth shut.
I'll see you in my next video. Mwah. Bye guys.